Hello everyone, I'm Otaku Oni-chan. Before we start the video, I hope you can take a moment to press like, subscribe to the channel to support me, and don't forget to turn on the notification bell to receive the latest videos. Thank you, and wish you all a great time. Please click on the super thanks button in the bottom right corner of the screen to support our team. Let's continue.
After he tried to activate another skill, there was an explosion. The snakeheads just started exploding like New Year's fireworks, creating waves from the explosions that pushed away everything within a few hundred meters. Yansung landed and finally realized what had happened. This was for the same reason that his attacks were much stronger than they should be with his level of martial arts and skills. The power of the essence was not the same as enhancing magic or martial arts. This power allowed changing reality in accordance with his imagination and desire. He received an epiphany about how to use the power of the essence. This is the power that allowed the constellations, the creatures that reached the maximum of existence, to possess the abyss. Constellations use this power to alter the abyss, create kingdoms, and bestow gifts on followers. As long as the constellation has enough power, they can do whatever they want. Hydra did not understand how he dared to attack her and said she would never forgive him for this. She promised that she would destroy him and crush his brains throughout the abyss. Hydra was a giant soul with a strong will. With his essence power, Yansung could not shake or change her will, but did he need to do it at all? His goal was to change the power of the essence, not the Hydra, but himself. Now that his task was complete, he could use this ability at 100%. The power of Yansung's essence seeped into his materialized ki, and it became a sharp blade capable of cutting not only any monster. He decided not to waste time and tried to use the new ability to cut the body of the Hydra. It worked very well, and his body was sharper than any blade. He could also cut through the accumulation of poison that could interfere with divine regeneration. Yansung needed to get a hold of his emotions and feel like he was in a regular training session. He cut off the heads of the snake and moved so fast that he definitely could not be seen with the naked eye. His goal was to completely defeat the serpent and show who really had power in this part of the abyss. The snakes could not comprehend how they could lose to such a weakling and tarnish their reputation as an invincible monster and lord of the free lands. They decided to flee and hide, waiting for their regeneration to return. But with such a body, it was difficult to conceal themselves, and it was very humiliating. If they couldn't hide, they would definitely perish because neither fire, poison, nor physical force had affected him, and without regeneration, they would simply die. It was a humiliation they had never encountered in 10,000 years. But Choi Yansung was absolutely not going to let them escape to survive and seek revenge on him. He delivered a powerful blow to the very center of their bodies to finish them off. After that, there was a huge explosion that tore the nine-headed snake to pieces. Onyx and his family watched the spectacle, shocked that Yansung had emerged victorious. Yansung managed to escape this hell almost unharmed and destroyed the most powerful monster of the free territory. He considered it a worthy opponent. His skills began to improve again, thanks to this victory. The world resonated with Yansung even more strongly. He inherited the Hydra's karma, divine regeneration. His invulnerable body now regenerates endlessly. Life is strange. As a martial artist, he never thought he would gain many skills, but now he is a completely different person. On Earth, even one such skill would have made him an A-rank hunter, but that no longer mattered if he decided to go beyond the path of a hunter and follow the path of a constellation. After the battle, Yansung met his friend Onyx and was very happy that he had escaped with his family and survived. He asked Onyx if he had changed a lot since their last meeting. He nodded his head. This was to be expected because they had not seen each other for several thousand years. The snake had also changed a lot. He even had a family he was proud of and loved very much. They needed to deal with the dead snake. Yansung asked Onyx if he might need some body parts. Onyx jumped away from him, remembering his past actions. The Hydra's body radiated a poisonous aura. It was dangerous to even touch the snake's body. As Yansung chopped up the Hydra's body, Onyx told the children to never follow him again. Finally, he completely separated the meat from the bone and could calmly move on. However, there was too much meat to take with him, so he decided to just eat all the meat before leaving. Onyx approached him and wanted to give him a gift from himself. He wanted to thank him for saving his family from a Hydra attack. It was an artifact of a subspace necklace, a very valuable item when hiking. He was very grateful for such a gift, and the necklace immediately began to open in his hands. This thing could hold a lot of different items. It saved space very well. The bones of the Hydra could be used to create various objects and weapons, and from the strong scales of the Hydra, you can make armor if everything is very well processed. Yansung could even put his cauldron in there. It was very convenient. He told Onyx that he had collected a lot of adamantium before they saw each other. The adamantium he gave him was still with him because he didn't know how to process it. When he learns how to melt it, he will be able to make himself a frying pan and a board. Onyx decided to present a different stone to Yansung this time, one he found while he was eating ordinary stones. From the moment Yansung decided to become a constellation, he began to see messages from other constellations. He could also see the amount of power possessed by creatures like Varago and the Hydra. The reason he was able to use the subspace necklace wasn't because he himself became smarter and more attentive, but because he was a being who had reached the maximum level of his existence's potential. He could also hear the world talking to him. It was not enriched or calum, metals that radiated pure magical energy. Adamantium was the opposite, a metal that absorbed magical energy. They were complementary. He decided to make knives and cutlery from walnut and a frying pan and board from adamantium. He thought it was a perfect plan. When Onyx talked to his wife, she said that this boy was crazy and she was afraid of him, but Onyx defended him, answering that he was very kind and strong. Even after Yansung put most of the meat in the necklace's vault, there was still some left because the necklace can't hold things endlessly. Just because it's a storage artifact, it also has a certain volume. There was nothing left for him except to simply eat what was left. Onyx was shocked by such a statement from his friend. Yansung loved his friend very much, so he returned to him and said that he would definitely share with him and also give a part to his family. But for some reason, Onyx was very frightened by this, and he jumped away from Yansung several meters very quickly. Yansung had studied cooking for thousands of years while he was the owner of a demonic pub. His cooking skills were at a fairly high level, but even so, this ingredient was very difficult to handle and prepare correctly. It was the meat of a powerful creature that had survived after refusing to become a constellation avatar, an ingredient that was not found in the Bloodlord's territory. Absorbing abyss monsters gives strength proportional to the absorbed creature, but if cooked improperly, the dish will be highly poisonous. But Yansung was not used to backing down, so this time he decided to stick to his principle as well. For him, preparing a dish from complex ingredients was like a workout. After cooking, Yansung asked Onyx to taste his dish, but he did not have a great desire. He decided to make a tartare because otherwise, it could be difficult for the stomach to digest this meat. The warm but firm voice meant that even here, he wasn't going to back down, especially since he was the savior who killed the Hydra. But Onyx was also quite a powerful creature. He was able to escape from the Hydra but couldn't escape from the poisonous meat that Yansung had prepared. Therefore, he had no other choice. Onyx began to eat the food, and Yansung expected to hear thanks from him, but as soon as he put a piece of meat in his mouth, fire immediately began to fly out of his mouth. In fact, it was very tasty, and Onyx began to offer it to his children and wife. Then he asked if they would like to know why there was no poison in the meat at all because he took care of it, and of course, he could not poison his friend and his family. They were all confused and wanted to know how he managed it. After they tasted this dish, the giant stone snake and his family decided to trust and respect him. From that moment on, Yansung, like a constellation, had followers. He could feel the energy coming from his snake friends. It was a completely different level of power. Yansung finally understood why the constellations wanted to increase the number of their followers, the true reason why the constellations were so interested in the Earth. It was a world with billions of potential followers. Any constellation that captured the Earth would gain an essence power capable of altering the abyss itself. He urgently needed to find a way to return to Earth before the future that the goddess saw came. He looked at Onyx and did not understand what he had cooked incorrectly. Meanwhile, Onyx simply continued to eat even the raw meat. The problem was that Onyx had greatly increased in size, and Yansung thought he might have fed him something wrong. He remembered that some products are not allowed for animals. You cannot give chocolate to dogs and onions to cats. Yansung wondered if hydra meat was harmful to rock snakes, perhaps damaging their liver or something. Onyx asked not to take the food from him, and Yansung allowed him to eat all that was left. It was cool to be Yansung's friend, but he couldn't stay there. This steadfastness in his personality was the reason the goddess chose him. Onyx brought his friend to a certain place to show him something very interesting. A completely unknown creature was drawn there. Yansung decided to ask what it meant. Onyx began to think about how to properly explain to him who was painted on this stone. He tried to show that this is a very dangerous monster that makes sounds with its mouth. He pretended to listen to him, but in reality, he did not understand a single word or sound. The only thing he understood was that this demon was very dangerous, so he jumped into the abyss without much thought. Yansung wondered if at least some demon could harm him after he visited the Bloodlord's territory. He had lost all desire to fight demons, but now he was told that there was a demon that was stronger than Varago and the Hydra. Therefore, he had no right to stop there and wanted to find him. He was really looking forward to meeting him because he had such a character, and his goal is to constantly find a new goal. He was flying in free fall, and he didn't know where he was going. In fact, it was the territory of the Master of Dreams and Desires. Here, the constellations could watch him, so as soon as he entered this space, they began to watch him. The avatars of the local constellation were already on their way to Yansung to destroy him and prevent him from taking root in their territory. Before he had time to explore the new territory, a squad of avatars from the constellation that owned this territory was already heading towards him. Yansung thought it was a welcome party to celebrate his arrival, but they asked if he was called the Invincible Training Master. He replied that it was him, and they respectfully welcomed him to their territory, saying that they did not plan to cause him any trouble or attempt to kill him. One of the angels said that her master wanted to meet with Yansung in person to ask some important questions. The angels used the ability of soul seduction on Yansung. He was surprised because he had never encountered such skills before. He said it was very rude of them. They immediately apologized and said it was an ability they had no control over. They also knew that their weak abilities would not work on a constellation named Yansung. He was ashamed and said that he was not quite a constellation yet. The angels believed and hoped that he would be able to become a constellation in the near future. He closed his eyes to enjoy this moment. It was the most pleasant thing he had heard in a while. Yansung asked what would happen if he refused the meeting. The angels replied that in that case, they would have to let him go, but they could swear that their master would not harm him. He was interested in what they wanted from him, so he agreed to the meeting. He asked the angel who was guiding him if he had heard anything about the Earth being a separate planet. The angel said that maybe he had heard about it once, that some constellations fought for the gate that led there. The guy grabbed him sharply and asked if he knew anything else, but the angel admitted that these were just rumors, so he didn't know anything concrete. He said his master might know something about it, and that he could ask him on occasion. The angel heard that there were a lot of souls there and said they would be able to help him capture the land, but Yansung replied that he was not going to capture it. On the contrary, he planned to stop the capture of Earth by other constellations. Now the angels considered him not only strong but also noble. These demons were called terrible, but in reality, they were kind, understanding, and friendly, although they could not control their seduction skill. Sometimes demons appeared on their way, demanding to give up their wishes. When Yansung saw him for the first time, he was a little scared. This demon used all his abilities against him, but the angels caught him. He demanded to be let go and was sure that they all also wanted to eat him, or rather his desire. He saw that Yansung had a desire for endless training, and he could not let him go just like that. The demon asked for at least a bite. Yansung asked what it was. The angel was embarrassed and replied that they were weak to other people's desires. He understood that they lived at the expense of other people's wishes, but he himself did not have a great need for wishes. He felt good without a loved one and did not need delicious food, but it worked differently with him, and the angel did not know how to explain it to him correctly. The angel said that his pure and unwavering desire to train was very tempting to the surrounding demons. The angel promised that he would keep his desires under control and he would be safe. He was one of the most favorite avatars of the host, so he could be trusted. They brought him to the master's chamber. They said that when he goes inside, he will immediately see the master. Yansung asked if the angel would go with him. He replied that such an insignificant being could not participate in the conversation between the two constellations. He reminded him that he was not a star, and since he told him everything, he wanted the angel to go with him. It was noticeable that the angel was moved by this and even cried. He said that Yansung was the first person to treat him so well. He began to think that it might be more dangerous than he expected. In case of danger, he planned to use the angel as a human shield. He was sure that the constellation would never want to be without its beloved avatar. This meeting was held on the other side's territory. This constellation was obviously more adept at using the power of the essence, so a lot could happen. When they entered, Yansung felt as if he had just woken up. Then he turned to the angel and saw that he was sleeping. He did not understand what was happening to him. He seemed to have lost control over himself. A voice said that his avatar was sleeping soundly and must be devouring his desires in the open, with his permission. He asked if he was the master of dreams and desires. He answered that he had appeared behind his back. It was a small child. He asked Yansung if he was the constellation that was being talked about a lot lately because he had wanted to meet him for a long time. He said he didn't want to upset anyone, but he wasn't a star yet. He still had a lot of work to do before he becomes a star. But the owner replied that this is not so because the one who stepped on the path of the constellation can also be considered a constellation because he is capable of the same things as them. This applied to him as well. He could use the power of the essence just like the others. Yansung wondered why the owner of dreams and wishes looked like a small child, what this could be related to, and whether he had any power at all. He began to remember what exactly happened when he and the angel entered the constellation chamber. It was an unusual room. From the very beginning, he felt some anxiety. Then he began to notice strange things behind him. He started to think that perhaps he had not done enough. He had been wandering in the abyss for 10,000 years, half of the time acting according to false rules. He perfected the divine cosmic art and reached the peak of martial arts, even reaching a level above all existing ones. Yansung thought about whether he really needed to become a star. He just wanted to enjoy peace, and after these words, he began to fall asleep. He asked the owner why they try to charm or seduce people and use their minds. This was the essence of dreams and desires. Beings who enter this room have their wishes fulfilled and feel at peace. His gift was hard to refuse unless he was a constellation. The owner said that the only thing he is not capable of is waking up of his own accord. He did not understand what he meant by wake up. The girl was sure that Yansung was confused and wanted to find answers to all his questions as soon as possible, but she wasn't going to tell him about it. The guy suspected that she had some proposal for him and hoped that it would be attractive to him. The owner would be happy to tell everything if he joined them in the alliance. She expected to receive a refusal, so she tried to influence Yansung's decision with the help of facial expressions. He was surprised but didn't like that all the constellations he met could only think about themselves and their desires. The mistress did not even try to deny it. The constellations were indeed very selfish, but they could not do otherwise. However, selfishness does not always mean loneliness or destruction. It always helps them to cooperate with different beings and find common goals. Now he understood that forming an alliance with her would be very beneficial, not only for her but also for the entire territory, so it could not be called selfishness. The mortals looked at them as gods, but they were actually also vulnerable. If a constellation shows even a hint of weakness, a stronger constellation will attack it, and therefore an alliance is necessary for them. Some constellations, whose future lies in survival, do not suit the destruction and devastation caused by the constellation's obsession with conquest, which will lead to a despair in which no desire can exist. Yansung said that maybe expanding the territories would solve this problem or find slaves to take their wishes. The girl replied that such an idea could only come from a constellation that used to be human. He asked what she meant by that, but the answer was simple. Constellations can enjoy unlimited potential like mortals since self-satisfaction or self-destruction is not available to them. So she cannot control what is not related to dreams and desires. Horrors require high-quality, three-dimensional desires, not those born of fear, but desires full of ambition or a sense of achieving a world of abundance. Since she was just a horror god, she couldn't do that in the real world. It was a surprise to Yansung that they could not practically exist without each other. In order not to offend the mistress, he simply said that it was too strange for him to understand. After the guy listened to the girl, he understood that she wanted to create an alliance with weak, altruistic constellations. In fact, she revealed many of her weaknesses to Yansung, which is very dangerous because he could be bad and greedy. She thought about it but decided that it would be much easier to negotiate with him than with other constellations with completely different missions. Yansung began to think and thought that she was very gullible. In such a dark and evil abyss, she should be more careful. The mistress could see that Yansung had very great desires, but none of them related to conquest or power. He performed 3,000 repetitions of one technique and could finish training only when he knew for sure that he had reached the maximum. He had unlimited desires to train. The girl studied his body and muscles while he considered her proposal regarding the alliance. This time, he was not in a hurry to refuse so quickly. As a result, he was ready to accept the offer but wanted to ask a few more questions. The girl promised to answer any of his questions. He was most interested in what he would have to do if they formed an alliance. Would he have any direct responsibilities? The problem was that he was very busy and couldn't assure her that he would be able to help run the alliance. For the girl, he was a truly unique creature because he wanted to learn first about the duties and not what advantages he could get from it in the future. As long as other constellations do not attack the alliance, nothing needs to be done. Duties have no meaning. Constellations never take part in something that is not beneficial to them. He can calmly go about his business, but the competition between the constellations drags on for so long that it becomes very boring. Therefore, it does not matter where he will be. They will have time to come to each other's aid from any point if there is a need for it. During the conversation, the girl released a bird into the sky to relieve any possible tension between them. They agreed to create an alliance, and the conditions suited both of them. From the outside, it looked like an older brother negotiating with his sister. Yansung was a novice who had just begun his journey in the formation of constellations, and he was sure that there were a lot of dangerous constellations in the abyss, and these thoughts were absolutely accurate. Being in an alliance seemed much safer than trying to cope alone, and he thought he could get help to get back to Earth. He received a message that he was accepted into the alliance of small constellations, and if he does not uphold his promises, then this may affect his essence. He just didn't like the name, but he pretended to be fine. The mistress approached Yansung and asked if he liked the name of their alliance. It was difficult for him to lie, but he did not want to tell the truth either. She started to suspect that maybe Yansung didn't like the name, but he tried to convince her that wasn't true. While they were talking to each other, a big tornado of fire appeared behind them. He didn't understand why he was a little nervous. It was a kitten of lava and magma. It said that it would treat Yansung very well if he became its avatar, but instead, he joined the alliance of small constellations. When the tornado subsided a little, Yansung was able to see who was talking to him, and it really was a tiny kitten. He couldn't understand it at all. He said that they had already spoken before and asked if he was a member of the small constellation union. The kitten at that moment began to increase in size. Yansung asked why he was talking to him telepathically if he was standing right in front of him. The answer was quite simple. Usually, the constellations did not leave their territory, thus the members of the alliance arranged meetings remotely. It could be compared to a video conference on Earth. He then asked if other members of the alliance would join them. The girl turned away from Yansung and tried to pretend that she did not hear anything and was minding her own business. The kitten did the same. It was as if they were hiding something, and the fact was that their alliance consisted of only 3 constellations. No one else agreed. Many constellations have a negative reputation, so they were not even offered. The kitten was angry with Yansung and threatened that he would not give the gifts he had prepared if Yansung was so disappointed. The kitten heard that he collected adamantium and orichalcum and said that he could make the objects Yansung needed from these metals. This surprised Yansung. It turned out that the kitten was a very famous blacksmith in the abyss, capable of creating a very good weapon or object out of nothing. He said that he could make a weapon for Yansung as a gift for joining the union. Koina warned that if Yansung said something unnecessary, he would get angry. Yansung hadn't even thought about gifts for joining the alliance, but he didn't have enough orichalcum now, so he wanted to ask him for help later. The kitten asked the owner of dreams and wishes if she had already given her gift to Yansung. The girl was embarrassed. She expected that it would be much more difficult to negotiate with him, but he accepted her offer almost immediately. Before she had time to bring the gifts, the kitten called her the dumbest constellation because of this. But the girl immediately warned that she could leave their alliance for such insults. Constellations, by their nature, are high-minded and selfish creatures. Therefore, before their meeting, they prepared something that could surprise Yansung, an A-rank martial arts scroll and nut bars. He was happy. This martial art had the effect of absorbing magical energy. Vampirism is a martial art created by horrors, but they thought it would be perfect for Yansung. The girls said that there was no horror in the world who could become a master of this art compared to Yansung. It was much easier for them to use magic more effectively than learning martial arts like a boy. They showed him their stockpile of precious metals, which they had begun to collect when he was a mere mortal. He thought it took about 10,000 years. He had long since lost track of time. It seemed that Yansung really liked the gifts. He thanked them and said that now he had enough resources to make the things he needed. The kitten was ready to go and started asking Yansung what weapons and armor he wanted. He approached Yansung and said that with this amount of resources, he could create an epic sword and shield. He boasted that he could create any design and offered an indestructible shield of adamantium and a powerful sword of orichalcum. But the guy said it wasn't the gear he wanted, and he offered to create a powerful axe and armor. The only thing he was worried about was that there might not be enough adamantium to create the armor. Yansung added that he also needed kitchen utensils, an adamantium pan and cutting board, and a walnut knife and utensils. The kitten was surprised and asked Yansung to answer seriously because he needed a clear task. But Yansung was completely serious, and it was clear from his face. Ever since he received his adamantium stone in the abyss, his dream had not changed. He wanted the best kitchen tools that could be used to prepare any ingredient in the abyss. The kitten listened to all the wishes and told Yansung. Then he seemed to activate his abilities to fulfill Yansung's requests, but in reality, he simply fell on his back and decided to pretend to be dead to avoid such a task. He said only 2 words towards Yansung. He wished him dead and called him a hipster. But still, he had no choice and started making objects for him with tears in his eyes. He felt as if he was forcing him to do something terrible, but since he promised, he would do his job to the best of his ability, even if he didn't like it. The girl said that it was time to answer his question. He said that he was interested to know what awaken is. It was true he was an incomplete constellation that had just begun to walk the path of a true constellation. When he defeated Varago and reached the rank of master, Yansung saw a message from the world. It said that his world resonance was getting stronger and the world longed to hear his cry. Verret said at the last moment that he needed to become a constellation. It was definitely not just like that. He was still a man with powerful martial arts, and he needed to take one more step to become a star. The girl tried to convince him that he was a real constellation. There was no such thing as a full constellation or an incomplete constellation. The essence is one. Then he asked why she said he would need to awaken. She meant that he still did not understand that he was a constellation. Even now, he thought that he was not finished, although she could understand his behavior. He was a very special being, even among all the constellations she knew. Yansung thought that the girl was putting him down because he uses martial arts and doesn't know how to use magic, but in reality, she didn't mean that at all. She gently touched his nose and said that he was mortal, and they rarely become constellations. Yansung thought that the girl was also special because she was a monster who became a constellation, but the girl guessed that he might think so. In fact, she was born immediately to the constellations. The power of existence of dreams and desires was released by the horrors and gathered together to create her. This was the true form of the mistress of dreams and desires. From her, he could hear the most truthful information. Most of the other constellations were the same: Lord of Blood and Battle Cat of Lava and Magma. They were constellations from birth. She also added that the fact that he does not fully understand that he is a constellation both surprises and annoys her. Yansung thought about what the awakening meant as a result, but everything was much simpler than he thought. The girl suggested that he simply accept the fact that he is a real constellation and not return to this question. He could not believe that it works so easily. In his mind, in order to become a star, one must go through a very difficult path of trials, but if you think about his past, it turned out that he had overcome a long way to become a star. The girl thought that Yansung was surprised that he would not have more difficult trials. He closed his eyes and decided to try to believe that he was a real constellation without any doubt. After that, he seemed to have completely changed and felt how his body was reborn, and the world resonance was activated. His stereotypes and fears began to be destroyed, and the world accepted his cry as a constellation, invincible training master. He could use the power of the constellation. The girl was blinded by the glow that completely covered the room at that moment. In order to become a real constellation, Yansung first had to believe in it himself. Before their eyes, a new star was opening its eyes in the dark depths of the abyss. The next avatar tried to prove to his star that he was a professional in his field and began to compete with the monster. He dealt a lot of blows to this monster, using his most effective techniques, but all his attacks made no sense because the armor of this monster was very strong. To defeat him, it was necessary to use a much stronger weapon. While he was preparing for another attack, he received a message that the Constellation Invincible Training Master was following him. The Invincible Master of Training gave him his blessing. This shocked Yansung and gave him strength at the same time. He thanked him, and the avatar got a second breath. He simply could not disappoint the constellation that followed him. Yansung had a very strange feeling, as if he always knew how to do it, and it was nothing new. For him, using a small amount of his essence power, he could bestow a great blessing and even send a message. The girl didn't want to spoil his pleasure, but asked why he was communicating with someone else's avatar. He apologized and said that he just wanted to try out his new powers. The girl replied that everything was fine because they were in an alliance, but if it was an avatar from another constellation, then he would have problems. From this moment on, before doing something, he needs to think carefully. Avatars are the most important factor for the existence of a constellation. Any influence on other people's avatars can be considered a provocation. He could get the answer to any question just by thinking about it, the same with his other mistakes. He did not even realize that he was already a constellation, and he continued to move from one side to another in order to become stronger. Although he was lost and wandering in the abyss, he was helped by the thought that these were all trainings of the goddess. He even thought that the magic storm was just a convenient way to move around, as well as a training tool. He really didn't think about anything, and even if he did, he just considered it a wonderful study. The girl reminded him that the vision of the constellations is far and unsurpassed. She invited him to choose his avatar and focus on it, but the fact is that Yansung did not have an avatar. But then he thought and remembered his old friend Onyx, who became his avatar and was very grateful for saving his family. They were fine. He could also expand the range of his vision using the power of the essence. Also, he can restore his essence power, and you can accumulate it more than the limit allows. Therefore, you don't need to protect it. In this way, constellations can use their avatars to explore the abyss. You can also see through the eyes of your own avatars. With this ability, you can share vision between alliances. Since they were all members of the same alliance, he can share eyes with them. But there was a place where he couldn't use it, a place where horrors were imprisoned. He could hide the relevant areas if he didn't want them to be seen. It depended on the personal preferences of each constellation. They have the right to fully dispose of their territories. To meet Yansung, the girl sent Aroni to him because she was the best at controlling herself. It is very difficult for horrors to control their desires. He guessed what she was talking about when he remembered the strange behavior of one of the demons and one of the angels. The girl asked if the guy had any more questions that he would like answered, but he replied that everything was clear and thanked her for the explanation. She was pleased to meet a constellation that sincerely thanked her because, in the abyss, this is very rare, and everyone thought only for themselves. The girl added something else. Since he had only recently become a constellation, she asked him to have less contact with others. In a battle between constellations, the one with more avatars and greater essence power has the advantage. The place where Yansung arrived after long training is the beginning of the whole world. It is an abyss constellation. He decided to ask the girl if she had ever heard of another world, that is, the Earth. She thought about it and said that she once heard about it and guessed that it was a planet from another dimension. She heard that many different constellations want to open the gate there because there are many souls there, which are very rare in the abyss. He asked this because he himself was from the Earth, and the girl thought that the gate between the Earth and the abyss was already open. In this case, the girl understood that everything should turn into chaos. But Yansung replied that in reality, everything is not so bad, thanks to her explanation. The constellations that come to Earth only look at each other but do not compete because they will only weaken if they compete with each other and lose their advantage over others. Some wayward constellation could simply take control of the souls and defeat the competing constellations. So instead of just fighting, they decided to increase the number of their followers. Yansung was lucky that when the gate opened, there were relatively normal constellations nearby. Evil and cruel constellations will not find a compromise and will simply try to seize power by force. This was their nature, and they behaved this way even when they had something to lose and risked their reputation. The girl was sure that he was very nervous after leaving his native land for the incomprehensible, selfish constellations. She added that it would be nice to have constellations that were the souls of the Earth in the alliance. Right in the middle of the conversation, Yansung closed his eyes and began to concentrate his energy. The girl and the kitten stood still and waited for what he wanted to do. He decided to get rid of his long hair because it was bothering him, and he was not used to it. His new friends watched intently as his hair flew all over the area. The reason why his hair grew so unexpectedly is that he accepted himself as a constellation, and the changes in his essence were reflected in his appearance. The girl thought that he made a decision to return to Earth no matter what and not forget his mortal origin, but that wasn't the point. It's just that his long hair really interfered with his training, and he wanted to become even stronger. That was his goal, to get better all the time. If the guy plans to return to Earth someday, the girl decided to give advice. Since the gates to the Earth are open and the nearest constellations are watching them, she thought that openly showing that he was a constellation was a very bad idea. Because even good creatures turn hostile against him. If these constellations are able to compete for the Earth, then they are much stronger than them. It does not matter how good a constellation he is, because they will not close their eyes to the fact that they can lose the soul that they possessed. She wanted Yansung to hide the fact that he was a constellation and not use the power of the essence. They would not look away from him if they noticed that the constellation had returned to Earth. He needs to mix with ordinary inhabitants of the Earth and, after that, quietly and carefully find friends among people, and they will become souls that accept his essence. Thus, the constellations on Earth will notice the disappearance very late. Yansung thought about it because he never planned to become an actor or a star, but the girl didn't mean that. It was enough for him to become a hero who destroys monsters. If you think about it, famous hunters also have fans. He forgot that he used to perceive Shikiri as a fellow hunter. Yansung then remembered that there was one constellation on Earth that knew of his existence. The girl said that it would be nice if it joined them. It wouldn't hurt them to increase the strength of the alliance. He immediately had a lot of questions. The girl was interested in whether she could trust this constellation and how she learned about him. It was a very long story, but Yansung decided to try to tell the story of how he fell into the abyss after meeting a benevolent goddess. He wanted to make it as short as possible and as simple. Also, Yansung did not want to harm the reputation of the benevolent goddess and, of course, his own. The girl said that it was a terrible story and immediately changed her attitude towards Yansung. Embellishing the story did not help in this case, but she replied that she had heard about this constellation even in the abyss. The possibility of seeing the future was not so often encountered. The girl added that she had heard that this is a constellation that constantly makes itself a laughing stock because it misunderstands its prophecies. It is very difficult to accurately predict the future, and what is the point of these predictions if you cannot benefit from them? Therefore, it was not very clear how she could help their alliance, considering how she tried to stop the evil constellations. She was most likely working with the other constellations. According to Yansung, this was enough to join their alliance, although she was naive enough. The kitten said if she agreed to share her visions with them, they could help decipher them and try to interrupt them. As a result, they gave Yansung permission to ask her to join their alliance. He was only worried about how she would react to him becoming an alliance. He needed to find a way to get in touch with her and asked if his friends could help. They did not have enough information to help him in his search for the goddess. Although Yansung woke up as a constellation and joined the alliance, it did not bring him any closer to returning to Earth. He had to find her, and because of this, he began to worry about whether he would be able to return to Earth in time. The avatars of the constellation of dreams and desires flew to Yansung and said that they would be happy to give him a tour of the host's territory. But the avatar began to wonder why he was doing it if he planned to return to Earth. He replied that he had important business left here. The kitten was preparing new equipment for him, and he should stay there until he finished. The avatar said that she was sure that this big catsith would make the gear legendary. The kitten was forced to cry and make this gear because earlier he said that he didn't like this particular gear. Yansung believed that this weapon and shield could fulfill his long-held dream. The angel asked what specific place he would like to visit because there are a lot of beautiful places in this area. But Yansung had one special thing he had heard about, the water play of enlightenment. The angel said it was a place for them to train to learn how to control their desires. Yansung felt that if he had to wait, then he must attend the training sessions which are only available in this area. The angel started to laugh and said that he really was a master of training. He had heard that many horrors used this place in the past, but since the master was born, it had been forbidden. It was because it is very dangerous. A lot of people go crazy during training. The essence of the whole training was to drink water from a well, but if it was really so, then it would not have been sealed. The more a person wanted to draw out the water, the harder the water became. One could try to meditate and get rid of one's desires, but the water did not become less. He was haunted by voices that said if he let go of the water, he would be able to return to Earth and visit his old gym, be able to taste spicy chili ramen, watch the movie about Batman and Superman. Yansung felt the touch of his ex-girlfriend, with whom they broke up because he spent a lot of time in the gym. He heard her talk about how they broke up on a bad note, but their love didn't end, and they still have feelings. She then said that they could be together again if he could let go of that rope. The members of the alliance watched his training. Although he is a master of training, it is very difficult for him. This well increased his desire, and the bucket became heavier and heavier. But since he was on a completely different level compared to the horrors, he persevered. He would at least not go crazy. The girl was very interested in what illusions confused him. She thought there was something unsurpassed, but Yansung was determined and continued to draw water. They could not believe that this was possible and how strong a person he was. He continued to train to pump up his muscles, using the power of his desires. He got rid of them in the same way. He was addicted to training. No wonder he became a star. They continued to watch him and couldn't take their eyes off him. The kitten said it looked unreal. An angel came to him and said that many horrors had gone mad trying to finish this training. She just wanted to ask if he was okay, but Yansung replied that he just found a very cool exercise machine. For the first time in a long time, he did not understand why no one could lift this bucket because the temptations were very weak. He considered Batman and Superman to be an overrated movie, and he hadn't tasted ramen in a long time because he had to watch his diet during training. And if we talk about the girl, then he had the consciousness for it, and even if they were together again, nothing would change in their relationship. These illusions were very weak for him. It was ordinary squats, only with weight. The girl was ready to bet that there are no creatures without desires. Constellations are no exception. The constellation was weaker in terms of restraining its desires, because why should a powerful being restrain itself? He had a very good base, and it wasn't just his fighting skills that she was talking about. But she didn't understand how it was possible for a constellation that was an ordinary mortal to possess such power. Yansung could do lightweight cardio if he cleared his heart and strength training if he let his heart run wild, and the rest of the time he rested and worked on tactics. He also sparred with Ironi. The girl thought that it would be problematic for him to stay in this area for a long time, but it seems that he had a very good time. He was a human army and martial artist, but he may also have the potential to grow avatars and build his kingdom because he was primarily a master of training. Although he was comfortable being alone and pumping his skills after training with him, Aroni became much stronger, and the girl was grateful for that. The kitten finished his work and swore he would never do anything like that again. He was shocked when he saw his weapon and armor ready. It seemed that this was the end of his carefree training. These were orichalcum utensils, which were created by the famous genius Constellation blacksmith. With such equipment, he could easily prepare any ingredient. The sharp blade could even be used as a weapon. Then he thought about it and decided, why not take this knife and try something? He swung and threw the knife inside of the alliance members with all his might. The girl said that this knife was sharpened by a Constellation blacksmith, and if he does not handle it carefully, it will destroy everything around. After the nuts and bolts, they decided to get ready and put on their glasses before Yansung started testing the adamantium products. They stood in a corner before starting. Yansung looked at his friends. In order to test the devices, he needed to gather some Kai energy. Even a small amount of Ki was enough to create such a large explosion. The girl and the kitten seemed to be watching New Year's fireworks. Pieces of the floor flew up to them after the explosion. A large cloud of smoke was formed on the territory after the attack of the materialized Ki. Not a single scratch appeared on these devices. The kitten began to boast that these devices were stronger than magical armor. Yansung said that he would like to have more tools, but the kitten replied that it was the problem of the person who provided the materials for the product. The guy said he had no further comments and sincerely thanked him for the work. Yansung's short break in the world of horrors was over. Although he was a man when he entered, he left as a constellation. All the avatars begged him to return to their kingdom. They really liked his special recipe dishes. It turned out that the invincible master of training was remembered as a master of cooking. He prepared food for them with the help of new items. One of the dishes was bop with hydra. Everyone was surprised where he could get hydra meat to prepare this dish for them. Yansung asked to call all the avatars because he had a lot of hydra meat, so he cooked almost everything. Aroni began to taste first. The mistress told her that she could run away if she thought that she would not be able to eat it since the hydra meat contained deadly poison. Therefore, she could not expose her avatars to such danger. But Aroni was shocked at how delicious it was. This dish warmed her, and she felt herself gaining strength. A bunch of avatars also started asking to taste this delicious dish. The horror's obsession with bop caused chaos, and the situation could be resolved only after the hostess intervened. He was able to practice cooking and increase his essence power, but he was a little uncomfortable as a result. The avatars created chaos because of him. He realized that ruling the kingdom was much more difficult than he thought. Yansung reached the territory of plague and darkness. When he saw her, she looked very suitable for such a constellation. He thought maybe he could use some essence power to keep this evil guy from stressing him out. The guy hid his essence from the whole world and disappeared from the visibility zone of other constellations. The world became so quiet and peaceful after that. He couldn't believe that he was being swept away by the flood of messages from the constellations because he couldn't do such a simple action. Yuku's ordered all avatars to find the invincible training master, but he warned them not to fight him alone because they would never be able to defeat him. Yansung continued on his way and met the avatars of the owner of this territory. One of them said that he had invaded his master's territory and such insolence would not go unpunished. But he was generous, and if he agreed to become his avatar, then the host would forgive Yansung his disrespect, and he would be able to step over his pride and recognize him as a valuable subordinate. The guy listened to it all the way through and started smiling. It sounded really funny to him. The avatar thought that Yansung did not understand what was happening and decided to deceive him, but stars like him were very well prepared for such a scenario. The monster began to threaten Yansung and said that if he did not accept the proposal of his master, it would end very badly for him because his master would come and deal with him. He began to convince Yansung that his master would really come. The guy had to cover his nose with his hands because this avatar stank of rot. Meanwhile, the monster ordered Yansung to obey him in order to stay alive, but Yansung wanted to see their master. He started calling him himself and asked him not to hide behind his avatars. He thought that the monster had run away a long time ago and was calling his master, but he was still around. It was clear from his face that he was afraid. Yansung forced him to leave and call the head of the territory. Yansung got into a fighting stance and decided to force him out another way. The skeleton got scared and wanted to run away, but it was too late because Yansung started his attack. He started to run, but the blast wave caught up with him and destroyed everything in its path. All that remained of them were piles of bones. In terms of complexity, it was not even comparable to Yansung's training. He demanded that the owner come to him and not hide behind the avatars. All this time, he continued to destroy them. Yansung said if he didn't come to him, he would be considered a coward because he couldn't even defend his territory. The meaning of such speeches was completely clear. The war between the two constellations was declared. The owner was shocked and asked him to stop. The kitten also thought that this was madness. He had even forgotten that they could follow him. The hostess added that it was irresponsible to call middle-ranked constellations to battle. The kitten, in turn, asked if it was connected with the fact that the messenger tried to deceive him. It was because of something much more important. He started all this in order to return to his origins. He began to activate his offensive and defensive abilities. Even after he fell into the abyss, Yansung was never a force to be reckoned with. Being a weak man, he always struggled with enmity, but what changed after he became a star? Although he himself did not admit this fact, he was always hiding from the older constellations like the last coward on neutral territory, away from any eyes of the constellations. He had lost the meaning of fighting. Yansung must follow his own path, but at the same time live as a constellation. The landlord was shocked that he was ready to risk his life and fight the herald of plague and darkness, but the fact that his opponent was a constellation did not change anything. He was ready to compete with anyone, and now Yansung's wish came true, and the owner of this territory appeared before him to defend it. He was very glad that he finally did not have to hide from them but could take the fight. The hostess was simply crazy about what was going to happen in a few minutes. She was very worried about her new friend. This was a monster of a completely different level, and all his previous opponents would not be able to match him, even if their forces were combined. From this moment on, Yansung had to act very carefully because he was unaware of the abilities of this creature. He looked very dangerous and immediately instilled fear in his enemies. He appeared in front of avatars and those who were doomed to die. His avatars fell to their knees in disgust and said that their lord had heard their prayers. Some of them had never even seen him in person. From them came wishes for longevity and a request to punish non-believers and those who showed disrespect to him. The harbinger of plague and darkness thought that his opponent was much crazier than he expected. For some reason, the constellation, weaker than him, challenged him. The Lord warned Yansung that if he loses, he will be completely destroyed. But if he starts this battle and wins, he will get nothing in return, and if he loses, he will lose a lot. But if he does not accept his challenge, then his status and reputation will drop greatly, and he will no longer have such support from the avatars. The owner asked how he dared to challenge him and called him a coward. All these long conversations were just to surprise Yansung, to quickly destroy the enemy with the help of trickery. A huge cloud of smoke appeared in the sky from their first collision. In this confrontation, despite the fact that Yansung challenged first, he did not let his guard down. This was his first battle against a constellation. The difference in the strength of their existence was very large. Therefore, he must finish him off quickly, using all his strength, because he understood that if the fight ends, he will definitely lose, and then his new friends will prove to be right. He dodged the blows and, in between, decided to throw a space fist that he had trained for several thousand years, adding some essence power to it as well. The Lord of Plague and Darkness had no choice but to take these blows and feel their full force. He couldn't do anything to Yansung because he was much more agile, and when he tried to land a punch, he already got hit by the guy. The hostess and the kitten watched this spectacle with open mouths. They definitely did not expect this. From the moment he was born to the constellation, he felt pain for the first time, as if his essence was simply torn apart. Other constellations rarely fought in person, therefore they had no experience, and over time their skills and reactions decreased. For him, Yansung's technique was something new and unexplored, but he was absolutely sure that it was not magic. Yansung threw a bunch of punches every minute since his ki energy did not decrease. He realized that his attacks were really working, so he couldn't lose this chance and continued to attack. Yansung even began to think that maybe the owner started to pretend to be weak so that he would attack unexpectedly. Hundreds of avatars stood on the ground and watched what was happening in the sky. They prayed for their master. Although it looked like the end of the world, it was very beautiful. The skeletons did not understand how such a miserable constellation dared to oppose their unsurpassed master. Yansung just hammered this monster into the ground with his powerful punches. He only used one punch, but it was very effective, therefore there was no point in using other abilities for now. But no matter how many blows he threw, he could still smell the smell of rot. This only meant that it would be difficult for him to defeat this monster. Yansung was already preparing for the next blow, but he saw the trembling hand of the Lord of Plague and Darkness. He raised it up and began to shout that he was surrendering. His face no longer had the stern look it had in the beginning. He begged Yansung for mercy and accepted that he had completely lost to him and was weaker. But this really surprised Yansung, and he did not expect such an act from the constellation. He thought that this was just a cunning move to lull his vigilance. Therefore, he just continued to strike and did not pay attention to his request. The owner received blows and said that he was ready to give him everything. The territory along with his avatars, anything, so that he would stop beating him. The hostess and the kitten just stood there in misunderstanding because a few minutes ago they were dissuading Yansung from starting this battle. The kitten told Yansung that the constellation was really pretending because they can't lie when they swear on their lives. But Yansung didn't understand why he was pretending to be a constellation. The kitten replied that this happens sometimes if the constellation is very badly hurt, then it can swear its life and surrender. This time Yansung believed. He stopped and no longer continued to beat the Lord of Plague and Darkness and began to smile. This victory greatly increased his strength, and now Yansung realized that he could fight with anyone. His martial arts even worked on the constellations. Although they all had different levels of strength, it was still very good news. In this territory, there were rivers of manure and buildings of rotting tumors. It was a kingdom of plague and darkness. He began to sense every avatar in this area. This was his new kingdom due to his victory over their past ruler, but now he was their king. Yansung quietly called the Herald of Plague and Darkness because he wanted to tell him something. He said that he wanted to return the kingdom to him. This shocked the ruler. He really didn't need his kingdom at all. He just needed a king. After these words, Yansung simply turned and walked away, humming his favorite song. The Herald of Plague and Darkness was still confused. The competition between the constellations was very dangerous. Both sides were at risk. The winner took everything from the loser. This was done to prevent a future threat from the loser. Completely erasing the existence of the loser is a common thing. But he spared his life and left him a kingdom with avatars. Although he was happy, he felt a sense of humiliation. He wondered who his new master was and where he came from. The kitten had not yet seen a constellation taken as an avatar. He also believed that it was not worth leaving him the kingdom, but Yansung didn't care because he wouldn't be able to rule it. The technique he came up with when he was training with Aroni was his greatest find. To get so close to the enemy that he couldn't use magic, and to not give him a chance to use the power of the essence. He understood that he would be able to compete even if he met a constellation that would be much stronger. Yansung continued on his way and headed for the next constellation. There he was greeted, as usual, not very warmly. The master of this territory did not think that it would come to him, but it seems that he had no sense of fear at all. He said that he would not be defeated as easily as that rotten weakling. He asked to prepare to face his entire kingdom. Yansung, for fun, decided to listen to him and then began to activate his abilities. He said that he was exactly counting on destroying his entire kingdom along with the Lord. After what happened to the Harbinger of Plague and Darkness, they prepared for all possible scenarios. In other words, now Yansung had to compete with all the avatars of the kingdom and then reach the master. It took him 200 years to destroy all avatars before reaching the master. Each subsequent owner told him almost the same things. They told him that he would not be able to win and offered a compromise. Usually, when he was offered some kind of deal or compromise, he didn't even listen to it to the end because he wanted only one thing: to destroy all avatars and their constellations as quickly as possible. The next constellation was of the middle level. The preacher of truth said that the other constellations would not leave him alone. This time, a kitten appeared with him and said that their unbreakable alliance would destroy another constellation. Yansung appreciated the appearance of the kitten and was very happy to see him. This time, thanks to the kitten, he was able to win in just 6 hours. It was a record. The kitten and the mistress lay in the sun and did not envy the constellations that stand in the way of Yansung. She was sorry that she still hadn't found a way for him to return to Earth, but he didn't seem to be in a hurry to do so. He had 2 important rules during his journey. The monsters he met, he cooked and ate, and he simply destroyed the constellations. He tasted his signature dish and thought about when he would be able to return to Earth. During lunch, some incomprehensible portal began to appear in front of him. As a result, this gate that appeared in the abyss became a way for Yansung to meet new opponents. Perhaps these gates even lead to the ground, but you can check this only if you try to enter them. He could not believe that this time fortune was on his side, and he really teleported to the ground. First, he needed to find at least some people. He saw a village on the horizon, but it didn't look like Korea. But when Yansung got closer to the village, he could not find a single person because there were only goblins there. He assumed that people had disappeared during his absence. Kitten said that even though it looked like Earth, it was actually a goblin planet. Yansung had to meet goblins in dungeons from time to time. He thought they were ordinary monsters, but contrary to his expectations, they were able to create a real village. Walking through their village, Yansung noticed something. Although the goblin kingdom looked like land, it was much closer to the abyss. This meant that portals appeared there much more often. Compared to humans, goblins had been fighting monsters from the abyss for much longer. Therefore, their system of fighting monsters was much more effective than that of humans. But this system only worked when they faced low-level, normal monsters. One day, a monster came to the goblins whose strength was on par with the constellations. The goblins looked at him like a god. He could destroy several dozen goblins and their houses with one step. It was the most dangerous wolf, called the Devourer of Planets, Lupus, a monster that was hundreds of times stronger than the previous ones. This could mean the end of the goblin civilization. The Goblin King had to participate in this battle because he was considered the strongest goblin. He tried to get closer to attack. He had no choice because if he didn't fight, he wouldn't be able to look his people in the eye anymore, even if he survived. He wasn't a coward, so he wasn't going to run away from this monster. The goblin understood that this was most likely the end for their kingdom, but it had to leave a scar on him that he would never forget. But he didn't even have time to fly up when he noticed something strange near the monster. It was like lightning that covered the entire body of the monster. He himself did not understand what was happening. Of course, it was Yansung who expected to surprise all the goblins with his appearance. He had only one chance. In terms of combat power, this monster was comparable to a medium-level constellation. It was not a constellation because its existence was not focused on one thing. He had only one chance to stop him, and he must use it. Otherwise, the fate of this kingdom and his destiny would be clear. He was ready to use all the skills he had learned in battle and in his training. Yansung wanted to activate them and put them in one precise strike that could destroy this wolf. Fortunately, everything went according to plan, and this attack was enough to defeat such a powerful enemy. Yansung always felt a crisis when he encountered constellations or monsters that compared to him in strength. These were powerful beings that ordinary mortals did not dare to face because they have a very high pain threshold. Koina said that such strong creatures have practically no experience of fighting against their equal opponents. He praised Yansung for the fact that he used such a strategy, but if he had withstood his last attack a little longer or had been better prepared, this battle would have lasted for several centuries, and he had several other weaknesses. All this time, the goblins were watching him and waiting for some kind of reaction. No one could move after what they saw. He hoped that they would not attack him, especially after seeing his battle against this monster. He ran up to them and could not understand what they were going to do because nothing was clear from their behavior since they were silent. He thought that the goblins still wanted to attack him. Therefore, he behaved cautiously. But they fell on their knees before their savior. Their king said that when the other constellations were busy doing nothing, he was the only one who came to them and helped their people. He was his god and his master. Now the goblin bowed to Yansung and continued to kneel. All the goblins knelt before him, and their king swore allegiance to Yansung. Now their kingdom was completely under his control. The power of a constellation increases with the number of souls that worship it. The world resonated with Yansung as the goblins rejoiced at their rescue and thanked Yansung. His constellation power was increased, awakening, and he gained a new constellation skill, the territory that belongs to an invincible god. Now he has become a medium-rank constellation. The kitten said that he had filled his mind with powerful energy very much, and he added that it would be nice if the same thing happened with Earth. But Yansung said that people will not be so simple because Earth is different from this planet, where there are only a few hundred goblins. If he defeats the monster on Earth, he will simply become famous. At least that was the case before he went into the abyss. People are not like goblins. The reality is that they constantly try to destroy and conquer others. There have been many such cases. The Goblin King saw Yansung leaving and started to catch up with him, saying that they wanted to go with him and fight by his side. He remembered that the goblin called him by his name. He replied that he was very pleased that he remembered it. Yansung said that he would be heading into the abyss, and as mortal as he was, it would be very difficult to follow him. But he didn't care. He was ready to follow him into the darkest depths of the abyss. The goblin fell to his knees and said that he was not like those dwarves who break their promises because of hardship. If he and his people could not repay the rescue, then they would live in great regret. Magical power surrounded the goblin's entire body. Even compared to earthly hunters, he was a powerful force to be reckoned with. Yansung said that his skills as a sorcerer would be useful to him, but he asked him not to regret leaving. The goblin asked what the master wanted to find in the abyss. He answered that he wanted to find a planet called Earth. The most important thing was to arrive there on time, but Yansung still did not know how far it was from him. This story is about how the human Yansung became an invincible training master and gained a goblin underling. Odin asked how the Lord was going to get rid of the meat that was left, but he couldn't take it with him because the necklace had a limit. The goblin said he could also use space magic. Yansung didn't understand why he hadn't said that before. While Yansung was stacking the meat, Odin said that a magical storm was coming and they needed to find shelter. He said he had been waiting for this storm for a long time to move a long distance. Yansung spent a lot of time fighting 3 monsters at the same time. He has to use the storm to move faster. The goblin had no choice but to agree because he had sworn allegiance to him. A magical storm could destroy a piece of land that was the size of a continent in 1 second. Although a magical storm was not such a rare phenomenon in the abyss, this particular one was very powerful. Yansung said if done right, it's a very convenient way to navigate the abyss. Although Odin knew that even the constellations were fleeing from it, he was ready to go even to the end of the world for his master who saved his people. But then he noticed something strange about this storm. His magical power began to concentrate and transform. The goblin began to jump for joy that now he would not have to die in this magical storm. Since the size of this magical storm is very large, it will create a lot of byproducts and disappear. Many places in the abyss are actually byproducts of a magical storm, and it is this storm that will leave dungeons in its wake. The monsters of the abyss appear right there, and if you don't deal with them, they will simply wipe everything off the face of the earth. Meanwhile, a dungeon was found in the USA. It was called the Mirror Illusion of Chaos. The entrance limit was 10 people, and there were 2 weeks and 11 hours left before the monsters came out of it. They had additional information about these monsters. The man didn't like it because it all looked like some devilish thing. People didn't understand since when dungeons, monsters, and constellations started appearing in them. According to the assessment of the federal department, it was a dungeon of rank C. Fortunately, this rank was quite popular, and if a level B hunter appears in it, the danger is significantly reduced. The rewards are quite large. A team of hunters named Hans has received permission for a raid and is on its way. This was not like the games children play. The members of their team expected to meet with monsters. The team of the son of the founder of the Parker Foundation was created. It was a very controversial team. Since the magic and monsters of the abyss penetrated Earth, people's lives have changed a lot. The core of monsters with magical power has become the most ecological way of obtaining energy on Earth. Thanks to the connection of the Earth with the abyss, humanity received a new ecological way of obtaining energy. In addition, other parts of monsters are also very useful. Thanks to all this, the level of biology and other sciences has greatly increased. Against the background of these many opportunities, Parker's fund developed rapidly. The pharmaceutical company, the big industry players, are endless. They all belong to Parker Industries, and the leader, Hans Richard Parker, when he was a B-rank hunter, was also the youngest son of the second chairman of the Parker Foundation. In other words, he was from the third generation of capable hunters. Their team had already arrived at the place, and they were ready to enter the dungeon. The manager saw that there were 8 people in the team, and 10 could enter the dungeon. Therefore, he asked if they were sure that they wanted to enter like that, but Richard replied that he had already added several people. He saw that one of their team's rookies was literally an E+ level rookie. Richard replied that they had 7 C-level hunters, and he was B-level. Therefore, there was no need to worry about a captain like him. He was sure that even if only one C-rank hunter went with them, they would still be able to clear the dungeon. Their team members were not even asked whether they agreed with him or not. A-rank hunters can only use 12 circles of magic at most. They won't even be able to damage C-rank monsters in the C-rank dungeon. The rewards are very large. If they are lucky, they can get items worth tens of millions. Normally, these rewards are not given to A-rank hunters who have not made a significant contribution to the raid. The bearer hoped for his leader, Richard. He told him not to worry and just do his job for which he is paid. He hired him for money, and he won't get his reward until they return from the dungeon. A porter was needed to carry their things. As expected, being rich is cool. Time status at 2 weeks, 10 hours, 32 minutes. Suspended dungeon status changed to raid in progress. The manager filled out his paperwork and asked if everyone had entered the dungeon yet. After his words, something very strange began to happen with the dungeon. Everyone thought the monsters would start coming out right now, but that was impossible. The dungeon seemed to come to life and received additional energy. The men thought that it would be better if they were monsters because now they will all die. With every passing minute, the dungeon grew larger and larger. It was simply gigantic. An error had occurred while evaluating the rank of the dungeon. It was not a rank C dungeon, but an A rank. Hans's team had already entered the dungeon, and now they were in great danger. There was no choice anymore because it was already too late, and they would not have time to do anything. This was definitely not something that the public services could handle. The team themselves did not yet know that they were in an A-rank dungeon. They were pleased that it was a ruin type and not a swamp type. The manager was ordered to send a report to the dungeon control team, and after he sent the report, there was still a call to the Parker Foundation, just in case. But even if they did, it would still be very difficult to save them. The bearer began to scream in fear and pointed somewhere with his finger. There were a lot of monsters, and they seemed to never end. It was a whole army. They decided that they needed to find a way out, and Richard ordered a novice to do this task. He had to find it on his own while they would go in search of the boss. The soldier agreed because it was much more dangerous to look for the boss. Richard ordered to carefully check between the ruins because monsters might jump out unexpectedly. He also gave permission to use amplification magic. There were 2 exits from this dungeon. One was connected to the outside world, and another if you kill the boss who guards the center of the dungeon. In A-rank dungeons, instead of looking for an exit, it is better to find the boss right away. While the newcomer was looking for a way out, he came across a settlement of monsters among the ruins. In the darkness, only their eyes were visible. The monsters surrounded the entire team, and most likely it was a trap to catch them. But since they thought they were in a C-level dungeon, Richard said that their movements would be easy to predict, and they just needed to be ready to start. The fighters expected to meet serious monsters, or maybe even a boss. This would make their life easier. But these were rank-and-file A-rank monsters that didn't compete at all, even for beginners. At first, they were afraid of them, but now one of their soldiers could calmly deal with these monsters. He used his fire arrow ability. It destroyed the abominable creature. Even the magic of the second circle would be enough for them. While they were solving the problem with them, new monsters appeared from the other side. One soldier could no longer handle so many monsters, so he needed support. There were more and more of them, and they did not stop attacking, even in the fire. They continued to move towards them. The team already started to panic, and it seemed to them that there were too many monsters for them. They needed to use an area of effect spell. Richard tried to keep everyone on their toes and give the right orders to destroy the enemy faster. Ghouls ran towards them from all sides. They jumped from the ruins and appeared out of nowhere. The sorcerers had already run out of mana, so they couldn't fend off their attack from a long distance. One of the fighters said that if this continues, they would not be able to hold out for long. At most, they would be able to fire a few arrows, and that would be the end. Richard understood that if they attacked only with magic, then they would suffer from a lack of mana, and they would be overwhelmed. He decided to do it himself. He activated one of his skills and began to melee the monsters. An A-rank dungeon can be completed when there is at least one A-rank hunter or higher in the team. With B-rank Richard, it was very easy, but this time no one was having fun. Some even believed that they would not be able to get out of this dungeon alive. Although the monsters were slow, they advanced without stopping.